It's a beautiful afternoon and we're here at Alamo Square Park and I'm here with Prashant, Shah.
That's right.
We are going to talk a little bit about business and thanks for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Great. So Prashant, tell me a little bit more, what do you do nowadays?
Sure. So I'm with an organization called TiE, T-I-E, and it's an organization that started here in Silicon Valley back in 1992. And the initial idea was we had a lot of successful South Asian entrepreneurs back in the late 80s. And at that time, it was actually uncommon for South Asians to be entrepreneurs, let alone successful. But they recognized that and they said, how do we help other immigrants become successful in their own right? And so they started mentoring a bunch of younger entrepreneurs in the early 90s, and they did this over breakfast at somebody's house for over brunch on a Sunday. And what turned out to be just casual meetings has now blossomed into this worldwide nonprofit organization with 60 chapters around the world, 10,000 members, and just a tremendous impact in the Valley.
So you focus mainly on foreign entrepreneurs, is that right?
The roots started that way, but entrepreneurship it's pervasive. And so today we say that TiE originally stood for the Indus entrepreneur, and we've reformatted that to stand for talent, ideas, and entrepreneurship, or energy, or enthusiasm. Call it whatever you want. But we've defocused completely on the idea that it's about immigrant entrepreneurs and so on. And the original mission was successful. Now if you walk around Silicon Valley, 50% of the companies have a South Asian associated as a founder or investor.
So it would good outcomes on that.
That's
yes.
right. That's right.
Tell me a little bit more about the challenges a VC faces. It seems there is some sort of aura, iconic thing around, but it's not an easy job as well.
It's not an easy job, and I'll be honest, I'm the accidental venture capitalist because I used to be in big companies for a while, like AT&T and Cypress Semiconductor, and then I did get a taste of the startup life at a company called Commerce. We had a great exit. It was acquired by Entrust, and everyone was very happy with the exit. And I was looking to stay at another startup. But what happened was this recruiter that I was working with pointed me to a few startups that I wasn't interested in. And she said, well, these are all backed by a firm called Hummer Windblad Venture Partners. And would you be interested in talking to them? Because they're looking for people. I said, sure. So it was just kind of a spontaneous introduction, and it wasn't meant to be necessarily, but I talked to some of the partners there and we hit it off.
Yeah, I found very nice that you're in your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
It's written that you like to meet occasionally other entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
That's very welcoming.
Yeah.
And when you meet a young new entrepreneur, what do you pay attention?
Well, there's a few things, right? So as another way of asking the question that you're asking is, what do investors look for?
Yes.
And generally most investors will look for the same things. And if you talk to VCs, they'll tell you they're looking for a good team, superior technology, and a fast-growing market. And depending on the investor, they may emphasize market over team or technology over market or whatever. But that's kind of the basic formula. And so for entrepreneurs, I look for some combination of that really tells a story that explains why their idea is going to turn into a really big successful business. And it's getting harder to do every day because the number of companies that come into the market now, it's just tremendous. So there's just more and more companies every day that enter into entrepreneurship.
Do you believe that the market is a little bit inflated, like of new startups?
It's not that it's inflated. It's responding to the drop in cost of getting started. So, when I started at Hummer Windblad, as an example, it took about $4 million for a Series A for a software company to get started. And that's about the ticket price to get a software company off the ground. And then over the years, it dropped down to about $500,000 back in the middle part of the decade. And that's when we saw the rise of angel investors. That's about the time that I left and helped start TiE Angels. So that's a group that I've been investing through now. And since then, the cost has now dropped from $500,000 down to zero. So today, you just need somebody who knows how to code and somebody who knows how to sell, and that's it. You're off and running. You could be here in Alamo Square doing your own startup as long as you know how to sell.
As long as you know how to code
That's
and
right.
how to sell.
That's right.
Important,
That's
very
exactly
important.
Right.
And I was speaking to this other entrepreneur this week, and he's not a tech guy. He was like a sales guy, and he didn't have a CTO.
Yeah.
And he mentioned that was a key barrier that didn't allow him to raise funding.
Yeah.
So this happens a lot.
This happens a lot, especially here in Silicon Valley, where you need both sides of the equation, right? You need somebody who knows how to sell as well as someone who knows how to build. And that's a tough combination to find. I will say that I run into a lot of good entrepreneurs, business entrepreneurs, and the number one question I get all the time is, do you know a good CTO? Can you help me find a good technology person? And it's really hard to do. They're in high demand.
So finding a CTO, it's not actually an investor's job. It's like a co-founder's job.
It is. It is.
It's important to, and many entrepreneurs, they come to you asking for the investor to help with that. Is that?
Yeah, and it's hard to do. It's very hard to do because the technology talent here in Silicon Valley is just in very high demand, and so they're not easily available. You really have to go out there and network and find people and ask around. Certainly ask investors. They're probably not the best source, but you should keep asking and keep trying to find a good technologist to partner up with. Actually, I believe it or not, I've heard a lot of people get together through Craigslist. So people just say, I'm looking for a tech founder for this.
Yes. Well, we found John through Craigslist.
We found our camera guy through Craigslist. So I know, that's why I mentioned it when you mentioned that to me earlier. I thought, it can happen.
And talking about yes, I found that person through Craigslist. But you meet the person, then sometimes it happens a good chemistry, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
How an investors evaluate that on the team?
Yeah.
You probably take a look to see if the team has a good chemistry, has a good atmosphere. How do you perceive that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one of the hardest ones to answer. It's almost easier to say I know a bad team when I see it, but finding a good team, it is challenging. I mean, you really want to look at the dynamic, the interaction. Do they listen to each other? Do they respond? Do they play and develop on each other's ideas and actually brainstorm on the bigger goal of making the company successful? Or are there egos involved, and is somebody more interested in just being the center of attention? And you try to look for those motivating factors to figure out exactly how the dynamics are playing out. And sometimes it's, you see it right away, like, hey, this is just never going to work. And other times, you're not sure, and so you have to do a little more due diligence and digging and spend more time with the team to see if it's really good chemistry or not.
Yeah, only after you spend a little time with the team is that you're able to know if there is a good fit.
Yeah.
How much do you get involved in the projects as an investor?
Well, we as angel investors, we try very hard to get involved, especially at TiE Angels, because we try to put as much help into the companies as possible. In fact, what's interesting about that question is we realized that through our angel investing forum, we weren't doing it in a structured way where we could really jump in and help the companies. And so because of that, we recognized that there was this need to have a much more mentorship-driven type of arrangement. And so we're actually now starting an accelerator on enterprise companies.
Very good.
And the idea is to really step in, hands-on involvement, help these entrepreneurs, use our mentoring network to its full effect, and help the companies just fly out of the accelerator. It's called TiE LaunchPad, so your viewers should check it out.
Yeah, so that's for sure. Pay attention to that. During your professional path, do you have any interesting, funny stories that happened to you?
I don't know if it's funny or not, but I will say this. So
Okay.
one of the things that I look for in particular is, do customers have a voice in the product that you're building?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we get people who come and they have these great ideas, but they don't necessarily test the ideas out. And so I remember clearly one day there was this company that came in, very impressive background, stellar credentials, and they put a stack of papers. We used to call it yellow pages. Now, you're too young to remember what a yellow page is. Today it's just all Google. But we used to have this directory of phone numbers and businesses, and we call them yellow pages. So they came in with a stack as thick as yellow pages and said, this is our product spec. And we've outlined in detail every single feature that we want in our product and so on. And I said, wow, that's an impressive book that you just wrote there. How long did it take you to develop that? They said it took about 7 or 8 months to write the whole spec. And I said, oh, well, that's great. Well, what did your customers think about it, or your target customers? They said, oh, we haven't shared it yet with any customers. I just thought that's 8 months wasted.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to get out and get the voice of the customer in your ideas and in your presentations and all of that as soon as possible.
So it's much better if the entrepreneurs and the companies arrive to the investors already knowing what the customers want. Please talk to the customers first before talking to the investors.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Important.
Yep.
Great. And when before you were a CEO, right? You had your own business.
I wasn't. I was actually running product management for a startup.
Okay, you're running product management for a startup, and during that phase, do you had did you have like concerns or doubts about the way you were going um, during your professional life experience? Did you ever have this moment like what I'm doing with my life? Which way should I go?
Yeah.
How did you face that?
Yeah. That I think that happens to everyone constantly, especially as an entrepreneur. So I will say so. To that extent, I'm sort of kind of an entrepreneur for the first time in my career, even though I worked for small companies and so on, because I just raised a small fund on behalf of our organization TiE. And so for that, I certainly had to face what the question you're asking about: am I doing the right thing? Is this going to work? Is this not? And every day you worry about that. You worry about, hey, in my case, because it's a fund, I'm raising money and I'm promising investors that we can make money if they give us money.
You're in the other side of the table this time.
It is. It's the other side of the table. So, I am an entrepreneur for the first time, but it happens to be a fund rather than a startup company, but still, it's the same notion.
How do you feel about it?
Nervous.
Nervous!
But that said, I know that it's going to work because, you pull the idea together, you get a lot of feedback. I did what I tell entrepreneurs to do, which is I got a lot of feedback from people. I talked to entrepreneurs who would be interested in our fund. I talked to investors who would be interested. I got a lot of feedback, so I feel very comfortable that this will work, and I feel comfortable that we can actually help startups with our program. So that part, I'm less and less nervous every single day. But there's always that edge feeling of like, okay, now we gotta start moving it forward, and that's good. It keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, this is really motivating you right now, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
What inspires you?
Well, I love the idea. So this whole area, right? I mean, we're here in San Francisco, but this entire area of San Francisco is wonderful. So I grew up in the Midwest, and in the Midwest, in the Chicago area, at least when I grew up, you kind of had a career path that was very traditional. Go work for a big company like AT&T,
very
Motorola,
corporate.
Very corporate.
Yes.
Work for a pension plan perhaps one day or something like that. And that environment, once I got out here, I recognized that that's not fun, at least for me. I mean, there's a place for that for other folks. But
yes.
For around here, getting into companies and really creating something from scratch and making things happen and being a participant in that economy, I think is what really motivates most people around here.
Do you have the feeling that being an entrepreneur is a way to build your own path instead of following others' path?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think a good entrepreneur really has, characteristics of what you're describing. They have a passion for what they're
doing something good for the world, and you're passionate
right.
about, and it's better.
Right.
Right. I saw that you also partnered with Astria for a while.
That's right.
Yeah. What did you do there?
So I was on the board of trustees at Astria. In fact, I was the chair of the board. So Sharon Vosmick over there and the team, they run a fantastic program. And I really like the philosophy that they embody, which is that it's a group of men and women. It's not just women helping women. It's really saying, hey, there's an entire group of people that we're ignoring on the entrepreneurship side. And data shows that when we involve women, when we have a more diverse group of people coming together in entrepreneurship, that the returns are much better. So it has, as an investor, for me, I look at that and I say, it's about the numbers. It has nothing to do with do-goodiness or anything like that. It's a better ROI if you can involve a more diverse group of people in your companies.
So they're a group that seeks balance between women and men.
That's right.
This is right. This is the right thing to do.
That's right.
Very good. And there is anything that you believe is important to add? Any message that you would like to deliver?
I think the big one is, a little bit of what I was saying earlier, that the cost of getting started in entrepreneurship today has dropped effectively to zero. And on the one hand, that's good news because you can get started with no money because you just throw things on Amazon or Rackspace or your favorite cloud place, and that's great. But what the problem with that is that there are a lot more companies that can get into that same market. So there's a lot more competition because the price of entry has dropped to zero. And so you have to figure out as a startup, what's the best way to stand out to investors, to customers, to everybody else out there. And one of the things that I do recommend is if you're a first-time entrepreneur and you don't have the connections to really get in front of investors and so on, look at accelerator programs. The good ones will make you stand out and put you in a place where you can be differentiated from all of the other companies that are out there. There's just a lot of competition, and so you really have to figure that out.
This is true. I would like to know now, talking a little bit more about the city. There is What do you think special about San Francisco and Silicon Valley?
I think the biggest thing in San Francisco and Silicon Valley is just that both entrepreneurs and investors are not afraid to fail. They understand that. And so when you're not afraid to fail, it creates an ecosystem where people try and try again until something succeeds. And we're lucky that we had that mentality from a long time ago, from the Arthur Rock days when they started investing in chips and so on. And because of that, we now have this big network effect. And so if you're in entrepreneurship, this is the place to be, right? There are other places where there are tech hubs and there are aspiring entrepreneurs and there's some investors and so on. But we just had a head start, and so we've got more money out here, we've got more people involved in this ecosystem, and this is still the place to come to for entrepreneurship.
Yes, this is great. Prashant, please can you tell me which are the three main aspects that investors pay attention when they're talking with a company?
Sure. Yeah, so most investors will look at three things. They're going to look at the market that the company's in, the technology that they've created, and the team that's creating that technology. And depending on the investor that you actually speak to, this market, team, technology mix is going to vary. Some investors will emphasize team and say, hey, the best team always wins. Others will say, it's got to be the best market, because in a good market, rising waters will float all boats. That's another famous investor saying that you'll hear in Silicon Valley. Or technology, with the best technology, you can really create a huge barrier to entry that no one can get past. And I think you have to kind of figure out when you're talking to investors just which one of those buttons and what their mix really is. But at the end of the day, you have to tell your own story and explain why your business is going to succeed. But generally speaking, that's how investors will break things down.
Which are the main challenges an angel investor or a VC faces?
Well, I think there's a couple differences depending on the VC you're talking to versus angel. Traditionally, angels are coming into a company and investing at a much earlier stage. In other words, they don't necessarily have the kind of market feedback that VC investors are looking for. And so you're betting much more at the ideation stage rather than something further along, for example, with revenue already or some proof points. And that's a tougher bet to make. So in that case, I do think that the angel investors especially are looking for, hey, is this team really going to make this idea work? Because the idea is not here yet, so I can't really test that out. So it comes down to, is it a good team? Do they have the right chops? Do they have the right technical ability? Do they know how to sell? That's becoming increasingly important in today's world, is having founders who know how to sell.
When is the right time then to find, after you have an angel investment, when it's the right time to go after a VC?
It varies on the company and the context of what you're doing, but generally speaking, the time that you want to go raise your venture round is once you've proven and validated that there's a market for your particular idea. So you've proven that maybe through beta trials or something like that, and you've also kind of proven out you know how to sell. That's really important. In today's world, there's just so much competition that you have to figure out what your sales engine is. You understand what your lead times are, you understand how you're actually marketing, how you get the leads, how you convert them into customers. And once you've built out that formula, that's a good time then to raise more venture money and just pour fuel on the fire, as they say.
I've read at a Paul Graham's blog something that you never stop raising money. What do you think about it?
He's got some truth to that. I think that there's another angle, another way that I would spin his comment, which is to say also that for entrepreneurs, raising money is part of your job. A lot of times entrepreneurs come and say, oh, I can't wait for this fundraising to be over so I can get back to doing my job. And I always point out, that's part of your job, especially if you're a founder and a CEO. It's just like part of your job is to hire people, to fire people, to motivate people, to do team events, to sell, all of that. Capital raising is just another part of that checklist that you have to be very comfortable with, and you can't really treat it as just a step function. It really is core to what you're doing. So from that perspective, Paul's right. You have to be raising money all the time, and of course, the best time to raise money is when you don't need it. So I would go do that.
And do you think that so it's not a problem for the CEO to feel distracted of the product when he's fundraising?
It is a distraction in the sense that you've got a lot of things on your plate and you have to sort them out. You have to prioritize them. So it's not that it's a distraction. It's just that you have to figure out how to juggle all of those things that are sitting on your plate.
It's part of the job.
It's part of the job. Yeah. So the importance of a CTO, in Silicon Valley, the two things you need is one person who knows how to sell and one person who knows how to build. And that's all you really need to get a company started. And so if you're somebody with a good idea, then the idea is not worth anywhere near as much as you think it is until you can figure out how to actually build and launch that product. So you do need to go find a counterpart if you're the idea person.
Okay, great.